Sir Keir. I've read it out. I don't really understand it. Can you put it into English? Good morning.
Yeah, let me have a go at that. This week, we've had a plan to try to stop the UK crashing out of the EU without a deal at the end of October, unless a deal's been agreed or Johnson can persuade the House of Commons that it's all right to leave without a deal. And that's been a plan that's been prepared over many weeks and months, and it brings together all the opposition parties and, as you saw last night, 21 former Conservative MPs. And that plan is to introduce a bill today, so we needed to take control of the proceedings today so we can introduce legislation, and we need to get it through, if we can, pretty well by the end of the week.
So what is your fear, Sir Keir?
In what sense?
In the sense that if you were to go for the general election, had you and Mr Corbyn decided yesterday, when effectively the ball was placed on the penalty spot for you to blast in, and you said, no, we're not ready to kick it yet, what are you concerned if you'd gone yesterday?
Yeah, let me be clear about that. Firstly, it's a trap. It's intended to stop the process this week because it would immediately shut down Parliament. And secondly, when and if Boris Johnson says, oh, yes, we'll have an election in mid-October, nobody believes him. And this is a major problem. Whereas with Theresa May, we had differences of opinion, obviously strong differences of opinion. There was a basic level of trust across the House of Commons. All of the opposition parties and a significant number of Tory MPs do not trust Boris Johnson's word. That is a massive problem for him in the country and in Parliament.
The Guardian says you and Mr Corbyn are consulting lawyers. What advice are you seeking, Sir Keir?
Well, we were having all sorts of discussions
I'm sure you were.
Yesterday, as you can imagine. We weren't actually consulting lawyers. We were consulting across the party as to how we should go forward and having some discussions about what our reaction should be. That happens all the time. I feel I've been in a non-stop conference call or meetings for weeks on end, certainly all of the summer.
And what happens next?
Well, we are very focused on this task of passing legislation to prevent us crashing out of the EU without a deal. It's a very difficult thing to do this week. There are lots of moving parts. We've needed high levels of collective discipline across party and across the opposition parties, and we're determined to see that through. And I hope we can succeed by the end of the week.
And lastly, when Labour supporters contact me on this show and say, your party has bottled it, this is what Mr Corbyn, and indeed you and many of your senior colleagues have been saying, we want a general election, we want a general election, you and your colleagues had the opportunity, and to use the language, you bottled it, what would you say to your voters?
We're not dancing to the tune of Boris Johnson. We'll have an election, but having just won control of Parliament, we're not handing it back to Boris Johnson so he can stop us succeeding. And had we said this morning that we would accept what he's doing and therefore crash our own plans, you'd be saying to me, why on earth have you walked into a very obvious trap?